Hello everyone, my name is Trevor, I go by the Mr. Trails, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at some of your top 100 stories that you guys left for me in the comments of a previous video. Before we get to it, I wanted to address something that still came up in the comments of the last video even though I addressed it in the description of the video itself. Console versus PC success. As I'm reading the script here, the top 100 solo wall breaks down as such. PC 51, PS4 31, Xbox 11, and Switch 7. The current top 10 breakdown is 4 PC, 5 PS4, 3 of which are in the top 5, and 1 Switch, also in the top 5. While there certainly is a bit of a game performance difference between PC and console, it is by no means a barrier that would keep you from performing even among the best. And there probably isn't much of a better week to demonstrate this because as of today, there are more console players in the top 10 than PC players. And the total representation of PC versus console is almost completely even within the top 100. But let's get into the stories, and first up we'll take a look at Draglore. Draglore has a squad example for us showing that while in the other video I recommended doing it in solos, it's not required. A few months ago, Draglore says they missed out on the solo leaderboards 3 times in a row, but around a month later got together with a group of friends who hadn't yet gotten a sub 3 done for the week and stumbled into the top 100 early. After some rounds of playing the trial with some more meta builds, they all found themselves in the top 100 come the end of the week with a full Xbox squad. Then sometime later they were able to help another friend get the top 100, as well as a random guy that the squad didn't really know getting 21 seconds. This would show that your first top 100 coming from a squad certainly isn't out of reach either. Next, we have a duo top 100 example from the Malkarian trial, as Mr. Kyurem was seeking his first top 100 against Malkarian. His comment on the video was more about asking about a couple tips and what the current build was. There wasn't a follow-up comment about getting the top 100, but I saw him talking about getting it in the Dauntless official Discord. Their final time being 21 seconds thanks to Crit Pot, this time was faster than the Malkarian trial before its top 5 times. Next we'll look at Geico. Geico had even less experience than myself when starting up solo trials, as they never even attempted to do a Dauntless trial solo and coming up against Ragetail Gnasher. Geico also wasn't very experienced with solo hunting in general, as they usually ran public or with some friends. After getting help with sub 3 minutes on the previous Pangar trial, they wanted to get a sub 3 in solos for themselves to prove they could carry their own weight. Their first sub 3 ended up being a 201, which at the time came on the bottom of the leaderboard. When they realized they had the chance to get a top 100 in the trial, they put the effort in to give it a few more tries, landing even in the top 50 by the end of the week. Geico also goes on to make a great point regarding the mental game that trials can create within oneself. Many players may make a mistake by getting hit or not being able to hit the behemoth for a while in the right way and chalk that up as a reason that they aren't good enough for solo trials. But when you take those mistakes as opportunities to learn and improve on what you can do better in the next runs, that's when you find more and more success. I'd like to refer back to the professional athletes engaging in film study example. When you have a third person's perspective of what you are doing rather than a first person's perspective of what you're doing, you can learn a lot about what you are actually doing wrong. This played a rather large role of when I was attempting to get my first top 5 run, comparing my gameplay with the gameplay of others with a better time and seeing what I could do better. Next up we have Somehow, who got a 27-second time on Malkarian in solos. This is another case of where it's not exactly intended to be a story, but this is a time I knew for sure ended up the week on the leaderboard. We have Ridley Boy, who got top 100 for the first time on Umbral Drask, which has proven to be one of the longer trials of the Crit Pot era. This was 6 weeks of attempts, getting 96th on the leaderboard by the end. Some of the examples have been about top 50-ish times, many being around 70th, but don't forget that you can just barely edge out that top 100 depending on the week. Krampus213 got top 100 help from a group that was actually carrying some people into top 100 spots. These kinds of groups tend to be rather rare these days, but what's funny in their case was being able to get a top 100 solo time in the same week. Perhaps some of the trial's charm rubbed off on them from the group that they ran with. Zeo Vale has a case of placing rather well on the leaderboard with a rather low-end spec computer. They correctly guessed that Scrave Week would be a decent trial to go for the leaderboard since it seemed like competition would be rather scarce. Playing on 1300 by 700 resolution, 2 megabit per second internet, a cheap mouse using chain blades, it only took them around 60 tries to place 34th on the leaderboard. This gameplay experience seems like it would be harder to play on than even a Nintendo Switch, so props to Zeoviel for getting this one done. For Cameron Vang, his first time on the leaderboard was as a PS4 player against Rezakiri. He explains that when trials were first released, there was a notion of top trial times being something only PC players could achieve. Determined to prove this notion wrong, Cameron set off to get a leaderboard time on what would be widely considered considered as the hardest or the second hardest behemoth in the game of the time. For Voltricity, he started by participating in group trials for Boreas and Rezakiri, then moved to solos, achieving a sub 3 minutes on Shrike and Skarn. He decided to put some work into getting a leaderboard time for Shadow Touch Koshai and missing the board by only a second. Then came the Drask trials, and he even decided to go with an off-meta choice for this trials in the Sword, not liking the outcome of the Strikers gameplay he'd been doing. After only a couple days worth of grinding with the Sword, Voltricity netted a 114, good for 54th on the leaderboard. We have Zyre GM, who was someone who relied on the Iceborne cell a lot during their gameplay, which made getting a fast time on Dauntless trials seem like a task they couldn't perform. On Scrave week, he had someone carry him and asked that person how hard it was to get on the leaderboards, and they had belief in Zyre to make it there. Zyre pulled out the Survivability Works, an Iceborne tough Skarn striker build to just accomplish a goal of completing the trial solo. After completing it, he slowly worked on getting toward using the meta build. A while later, he ends up getting around the 90th spot on the leaderboard in that same Scrave week. Blazing X Gamer got a top 100 on Shrike trials, with the first attempt of the trial being a 158, giving them hope for the week. After a bit of grind, netted the 48th spot on the leaderboard by the end of the week. And we have Espresso, known as Maeo on PS4. On his first trial, Quillshot, before Catalyst had been introduced, he grinded out a 429, being satisfied with just completing the trial for the time being. Espresso enjoyed the trial scene and kept playing them even without much success, as he just liked the competitive nature of them. Once Charog came on the scene, Espresso got the sub 3 minutes on the first try and knew it was time to grind. After days of grinding, Espresso gets a 107 solo and 32 seconds in groups, good for top 100 in both cases. Espresso points out, if you keep playing Dauntless, there will eventually be a week where you are able to get a top 100, and I very much agree with this statement. We've already covered today that PC versus console doesn't make very much of a difference, with the actual current state of this leaderboard being mostly console players in the top 10. I feel part of the reason that this is the case is where PC players excel in is generally when they have to perform a complex series of inputs. Using a keyboard makes complex series of inputs a little bit easier, as when you combine it with a mouse you have 7 or 8 fingers available for inputs, versus controllers where you have 4 fingers available on a standard grip and 6 fingers available on a claw grip. But a reason you can be competitive at Dauntless no matter what platform you are on is that the inputs are not very complex. For most inputs you only need 4 or 5 fingers on a keyboard and mouse depending on what you're doing, so it basically comes down to your comfort with using a keyboard and mouse or your comfort with using a controller. If you're very comfortable with using a controller, then you should be very comfortable competing at a high level in Dauntless. And that is going to conclude this new installment of Stories of Trials. Thank you all a lot for leaving your comments of your experiences on the previous video. Hopefully the more stories that are shared, the more of you will be motivated to give leaderboard runs a try for yourselves. If you guys enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like. And if you enjoy Dauntless content, consider subscribing to the channel where I post Dauntless content every week. I've been Trevor, I go by the Mr. Trails, and I will catch you guys next time.